How's the royal family? I pray that everyone is doing well. Well, my royal family, there's been a lot of bullshit in the news. And I and you are not no damn fools. What I've been noticing is that they've been talking about everything but reparations. And like I said in one of those videos that I did recently, that you can feel it. You can actually feel the energy of ADOS. And these politicians are trying their best to avoid that inevitable conversation. Now, we got people like Elizabeth Warren, which don't believe none of this. She don't back none of this, because she's also made a mockery of ADOS and say, well, the gays need ADOS, or whoever else that they want to throw in the pile. Because anytime we start confronting the enemy's original sin, then they automatically want to throw up in our face about every other group's plights and problems. And I have said over and over, when we have these discussions to how you control the narrative, you let folks know I'm here for a paycheck. I'm only talking about a paycheck, and I'm not entertaining nothing else but ADOS for our folks. We're not talking about nothing else on about other people's shit. If y'all have not thrived in your system, that is not my problem. And we have seen, because many of us is bringing it up, that every other group has been helped and supported, and we see that these immigrants are coming over here and they are getting free everything. And who's fronting the bill? The taxpayers. And we are taxpayers. So they want to act like we don't contribute to society. Oh, shoot, they gonna get them taxes up out of you. They don't give a damn. They don't give a damn. And so it is our duty and responsibility to keep talking about what is due to us. Somebody out here that got a channel, and we still don't have enough channels, need to be talking about reparations every day on somebody's channel to keep it out there. Because this country knows how to throw distractions our way. So now people are talking about this crap with Trump being a racist. Whoop-de-doo. Trump has always been a racist. What's the big fucking deal? You know? So something that I had missed, and some of us may have missed, I don't think all of us have, that now Chuck Schumer is backing ADOS. I wonder why. But we have to be specific in language. He's backing the study of it. The study of it. And you can study shit forever, because this country is famous for, are we going to do an investigation? You know, that's they try to pacify us with words. So I have this 14-minute, not 14, excuse me, a little over 17-minute video. Schumer announced support for bill to form committee on reparations. And this was yesterday. And let's hear what they have to say.
To secure support from black voters, reparations for the descendants of Americans who were enslaved has emerged.
Are we having a little slip up here?
As something of a litmus test. The conversation extends beyond the campaign trail.
House lawmakers held a hearing last month over a bill that would set up a commission to study paying reparations. It would not involve the government start cutting checks to African Americans, which some studies estimate could cost up to $14 trillion. The bill's sponsor, Texas Democratic Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, joins us now from Capitol Hill with details on this. Good to see you, Congresswoman.
It's a delight to be with both of you. Good morning to everyone.
Good morning. So on the issue of reparations, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says he opposes them. I'm going to play a little bit of what he had to say about it yesterday.
I find myself once again in the same position as President Obama. We both oppose reparations, and we both are the descendants of slaveholders.
So, Congresswoman, Leader McConnell was referencing a questionnaire that President Obama filled out back in 2008, and we're going to put that up on the screen so our viewers can see it. The president then said, "I fear reparations would be used as an excuse for some to say we've paid our debt and to avoid the much harder work of enforcing anti-discrimination laws in employment and housing, lifting people out of poverty, improving public education, rehabilitating young men coming out of prison." What's your reaction to Leader McConnell, and do you agree with President Obama?
Well, first of all, it is interesting to have Leader McConnell always cite the former president for anything he wants to cover his bad behavior. It is interesting that only the day of the moment President Obama was inaugurated, that Mitch McConnell was with a group of senators or others to determine and ensure that President Obama did not have a second term. He is no fan of President Obama from my perspective, but he is certainly no fan of the broad understanding of what the Commission to Study Reparations is all about. And I would ask him to clean up his own backyard before he begins to target others. We know that the former president had a record of inclusiveness. I don't know if Senator McConnell can say that. But I think the real issue is that this legislation had been introduced for 30 years prior by former Congressman Conyers. I'm honored that I was a member he chose to take the leadership, and that's what we have done. And we turned this discussion into a constructive discussion on the issue of race. This is not an idea or a legislative initiative only for the African American community. That is, I think, insensitive, and it is not reflective of the role that African Americans played in building this nation and creating the wealth upon which this nation is built, and that is cotton. For the historians, we all remember the term cotton was king, and it was. And it was able to be king in the land of the South, and the bankers of the North all were using cotton as the greatest product to provide the economic engine of this country. And what we're simply saying is that this commission will study reparations and the proposals thereof, which is not something that is foreign, if you will, to this nation. We have done so in other groups before, and we're going to take this very seriously. I'm excited about the momentum and the numbers of members of Congress who've joined this discussion, and we're looking forward to getting this passed.
But Congressman, just to get you on the record on this, do you agree with President Obama's statement then? Because he did go on to say, and this was back in 2008, that he was rejecting the reparations argument because at the time the political will did not exist to provide them. But is it your sense now that there perhaps is a will by some in this country, including certain members of Congress, to try and at least study this proposal?
Absolutely, and I think you have just highlighted the comments made by the former president when he raised the point of political will. We're building the political will, but we're also building the evidence. A professor from the...
Now I'm going to stop it right there for just a moment because this is a bit of a long video, my royal family. No, what they are doing, as I'm listening to this, is designating themselves as gatekeepers because there's nothing to study. So these folks that I often say the enemy and the enemy supporters, and that is a supporter of the enemy. Yes, Sheila Jackson Lee is, and she is not a DOS. We already know this. They are, again, designating themselves of being the gatekeepers that look like you and I. And then these enemies, you know, the ones that we for sure know that are our enemies, are getting on board. These white folks, they are there to watch the ones that look like you and I, just in case they slip up and we happen to get a true ass check. So they watching their ass to make sure they do their job, just holding down the fort. That is it, and that is all. So some of our folks that don't understand what's going on be like, well, look at, there's white people getting on board. No. They have a whole nother agenda. Wanted to put that out there because I may forget when I close it out, so I may interject if I pick up some things in this long video. So let's continue on.
From Duke University, Professor Darity had a figure that showed that white families in Boston made $247,000, and the wage disparity was that African American families had an $8 wealth quotient, and white families had a $247,000 quotient in terms of wealth. Just recently, this morning, I heard that a county, Montgomery County, had a 19% population of African Americans, and that the most of the police arrests were African Americans in a county where African Americans were only 19% of the population. The disparities in housing, the economy, healthcare, education, the wealth disparity, as I mentioned, and as well the disparities in criminal justice, mass incarceration, all of these are elements that can be wrapped into the discussion and the commission study on reparations. And frankly, the Japanese Americans have received reparations, Native Americans have received reparations, and many others. And we will account for that as we continue to debate this question and bring forward scholars and activists and others who have been working very hard, not on a quotient of anger, but certainly one of anguish, and the willingness to sit down with people who are different from our communities and to talk about the constructive approach to move forward in this whole reach to bring America together, to understand the hurts of other people, and to find a common ground when communities have been hurt by policies of this nation. And certainly those of us who are African Americans were not a whole person in this country, and certainly we're not a whole person when this Constitution was written.
Congressman, when sort of thinking about this commission, I was kind of grappling with the questions that they would have to answer, because they're really big and difficult questions to answer. You know, what are the reparations for? Is it just for slavery, or is it for Jim Crow and the policies afterwards that have had a dramatic impact on the ability of African Americans to generate wealth? It has exacerbated this wealth gap, right? Who's going to pay for it?
See, this is where the bullshit comes in. Every other group, they didn't have no motherfucking study. And then they want to sit up and talk about, well, what is it for? Now all of a sudden America gets that thing called convenient amnesia. We know exactly what it's for. We built this motherfucker. Then when so-called slavery was over with, then we went into this sharecropping shit that they held us at our will and did all the trickeration and the things that they continue to do to us here. And then that other component that I add when I was talking about reparations was that even they own are realizing if they would have done right by us, how the economy would have been thriving. I think they said it's something like $2.5 trillion that's not even circulating in America, and this is because of them and stuff. So, you know, this is where they want to control the narrative if we did receive reparations, and they want to put them in these bullshit ass programs and stuff. So it's all about still trying to control us. Again, it's about a paycheck. It's about a paycheck. That is it, and that is all. And then the other concern that they are having, because if this thing does blossom, then the private sector is going to be attacked. And I have to agree, and I disagree with T. West, or unquote Afro Synergy, quite a bit, but he said something true, that somebody said, well, if you go after the private sector, first thing somebody threw up, well, that's going to cost. No, the government is going to go after them. They going to pay for that. They going to foot the bill. And that is not going to come out of ADOS money. So they also are worried about the ripple effect of ADOS. It is in so many layers and stuff. So let's not lose sight of the private sector too as well in the ongoing tyranny.
Who's responsible? How much is it going to cost, and how are you going to go about doing that? These are big questions. We talked about some research indicating that it could cost $14 trillion. Have you sort of contemplated how this country would go about paying, and whom would receive these reparations?
Marie, thank you so very much. Those are very thoughtful questions. The one point that I want to make is that America is not broke. It is not a country that is without resources. And I think the important point is that this is a commission to study the answers to all the questions that you've raised. This is a governmental commission, like the Federal Regulatory Commission or the Federal Communications Commission. The members will be appointed by the President of the United States, the Leader of the Senate, Speaker of the House, and then a number of scholars, which are multiple in terms of the outstanding work that they have done. But the whole idea of these points that you've made, the commission will discern whether the 250 years of slavery, bondage, being unpaid, without workman's comp, without salary, without health care, led the African American population to then fall into the devastation of the Jim Crow era, the hanging fruit on the trees, the inability to vote, the redlining of housing, the mistreatment of veterans who came home from World War II and they couldn't benefit from the Eisenhower plan of housing or the GI Bill. All of those are driven toward race and the treatment of African Americans as people who were descendants of slaves and were unequal. That certainly is a relevant question for a commission that wants to do what is right. As it relates to the solutions, there are scholars and others that are researching to look at the broad-based concept of how we would respond as individuals or an individual manner or in a global manner, because I can assure you there are neighborhoods, there are historically black colleges, there are healthcare disparities, there are the mass incarceration, criminal justice issues. There are a massive number of issues that can be attributable to or attributed to the treatment of African slaves as they came here to the United States and worked for 250 years. And people can't cite individual outstanding persons, and it's insulting for Leader McConnell to suggest that he gave us President Obama. President Obama was an excellent American who ran for president and was voted on by the American people on the basis of his beliefs, his character, his leadership. And he will go down in history as one of the greatest presidents that we have ever had on his merits. And so this question of he gave us nothing. We gave America an outstanding leader who happened to be a descendant of Africans, if you will. But the point is that we have a clear, discernible impact that can be shown from holding Africans slaves for 250 years and America never seeming to move beyond that status of inequality. I believe this commission, H.R.40, and we're encouraging members of Congress and we're encouraging those of you who are in the various congressional districts, reach out to your member of Congress and so that we can continue to work on this. We had a hearing, we expect to have another hearing, a markup, and we hope to put this on the floor of the House, not negatively, but constructively to bring about a very positive discussion.
Congressman, when you say America's not broke, I could argue that certain members of your own...
I want to stop there for just a minute. Now, Sheila Jackson is full of shit. This first discussion that they had, the people that they brought up there was not speaking in our behalf. I don't know how they went about handpicking these people or anything. See, my royal family, I have said that we all have a seat at the table. Let the people pick who we want to speak in our behalf. The first person I would pick is, let me think, oh my goodness, why would I forget his name? Oh my goodness, forgive me, but y'all know who I'm talking about. He done wrote books about it and everything. It's one of our elders. It will come to me in a bit, maybe later on as I'm thinking about it, but that brother needs to be the first one that have a seat at the table, and I know that Antonio and Yvette have some issues with this brother, and that's some shit behind the scenes that we need to work out and stuff. But we do need a voice there to constructively speak about what's going on. People who have put in the footwork, who knows the history, because every time I listen to Dr. Claude Anderson, it came to me. Forgive me. I'm so glad that it came to me that Dr. Claude Anderson has put in the work. See, she's playing and she's full of shit, because that sham show, that's what Dr. Claude Anderson called it. It was a sham show. You got some little dude up there that's running up and down the streets of New York in his drawers and stuff. You know, you got Danny Glover up there speaking. He can barely talk. And he's a Pan-Africanist. You know, he's talking about global stuff. We need to be talking about specifically what we are dealing with here in America. We can't entertain other people's stuff. This is serious, and we're not going to let nobody change the narrative. So Sheila Jackson, whenever they have their next sham show, they're going to bring up some more people we don't know nothing about, because they playing with us. Again, these are people who have designated themselves to being the next gatekeepers and not getting nothing done. And we're going to have to really put our voices out there and really let these people know up there in D.C. it ain't going that way. Let's put the actual people up here to speak truth. You don't want to get to core issues. You don't want to deal with it raw. I speak raw over here, and it can make people uncomfortable. And it's uncomfortable what happened to our ancestors, and it's uncomfortable what they continue to project on us. And I was thinking, they've been coming up with all these crazy figures about what they owed us, and I finally came up with something. There is no figure. They have to pay us until they make us completely whole. So that is endless. We need a lump for each individual, and a lump could consist of 10 to 5 million, and then on top of that lump sum, maintenance, our mental, our physical, our anguish, then the interest in that, and then the continuous shit that they do to us, and the things that they have done to us in the medical industry, and the things that they have done with this piece of education. See, it goes much deeper than that. So I don't have a figure till they make us whole. So that's me. That's how that's the conclusions that I came up with it, because they want to try to come up with a number and say, okay, that's the cutoff point right there. They continuing to do stuff to us. And the reason why I came up with the statement that I'm making is because, trust and believe, whatever figure that they come up with, and it's going to be always the enemy because they want to keep controlling this narrative, is on the back end, they're going to be trying to find a way to siphon it off of us. So they still are fucking over us. So this thing will be endless until you make us whole. And you know that they are going to always project tyranny and terror on the royal family as we continue on.
Own party would argue differently, particularly in light of the new tax bill brought forward by this administration, that in fact we are broke. In fact, we're hitting our debt ceiling.
National debt is $22 trillion, Congresswoman. America's debt is the largest sovereign debt in the world for a single country. So when people who watch this interview hear you say that the United States is not broke, a lot of people would say $22 trillion is, it's not, we're not talking small potatoes here. So adding another $14 trillion to pay out these reparations, which is what one estimate is citing, would be difficult for a lot of people to understand.
Well, again, I think you're speculating by, as you indicated, an estimate. and that is not a number that we're going to adhere to. What we are going to adhere to is a wait and see. We're going to adhere to the fact that this commission should be established. It is a legitimate concept, and let the commission proceed with its work, but also proceed with the approaches that should be taken that may cure or bring about some curative manner to deal with some of the disparities that I've spoken about. I don't think that we can accept the fact that a white family in Boston has a wealth amount of $247,000 and a black family, African American family, has an $8. I don't think we can accept mass incarceration where most of the individuals are African American and brown individuals. So I think what is important is that we bring about a legitimate discussion through this commission to be effectively allowing for the American people to hear the facts about what slavery did to a population and what it did to America, and then begin to assess what those proposals are, what those suggestions are. And frankly, I believe that Americans will come together to recognize the rightness of this. And I also want to make mention of it. I absolutely disagree with the Trump tax fiasco. It was a boondoggle, unnecessary, and it's costing America a lot. I hope we will have the courage to roll back some of these unfortunate tax loopholes that have really hindered America's commitment to education and commitment to health care and commitment to ensuring everyone has access to good housing in this country. And who knows what the commission may do. It may, in fact, as it looks at its proposals dealing with African Americans, as we all do in this country, and that's what I believe in my legislative policies, whatever I do, I want to help all of my constituents, no matter what their racial background, their ethnic background. And so policies may come about that may, in fact, provide a good pathway of economic opportunity for all Americans, because when one group is lifted up and given that pathway of growth and success, then others can benefit as well. More taxes come into the coffer, if you will. When more people are working, more people have wealth. But you cannot ignore this history that has been ignored. It's been shoveled under the snow pile, if you will, and it's in the past. And sadly, it's not even discussed in America's history books today, in elementary, primary, and secondary school. So I frankly believe this is long overdue. Again, I come, as some will say, in peace, and with the spirit of harmony and reconciliation for all of America. We need H.R.40, a commission to study the reparations in the period of slavery from 1619 to 1865, and Texans only got the word 2 years later.
Right.
And we need to have a resolution and solutions to deal with all of these disparities that are impacting the African American community and, of course, impacting America.
So, Congresswoman, before we let you go, we've got to ask you a few other questions.
Wait, I just want to
do you have
I do have
reparations?
one more question, Congressman, on reparations before we move on to talk about Robert Mueller's upcoming testimony. One of the things that I think, the House held a hearing where you invited certain people, scholars, writers, to talk about this before the House. Ta-Nehisi Coates made the point that I think gets lost in the discussion, because when people in this country hear the word reparations, you'll hear a lot of Americans saying, look, my family didn't own slaves, or my family only got to this country after the Emancipation Proclamation, and so why would I as an American be held responsible for something that happened before my family got here? And yet, one of the points that Mr. Coates made is that this is also to include people who suffered, as Anne-Marie pointed out, through Jim Crow, and that there are people living in America today who remember, who have lived the discrimination that we're talking about, which apparently, or according to the report that is coming from the House, would encompass these reparations.
But it's beyond Jim Crow. Jim Crow is a specific set
That's
of
right.
laws, but for many, many decades beyond it, there's redlining, there's all other, many policies, government-approved policies that resulted in this wage gap that we're seeing right now that continues,
And so people don't seem to. So if you would just in just a few seconds, Congresswoman, just explain that to people who are hearing your message and have that argument, which is, look, this didn't affect me.
It's an excellent point that Mr. Coates made, and it's very true. What I said is that the legacy of slavery was the Jim Crow era, the fact that we had to pass a Voting Rights Act in 1965 and a Civil Rights Act in 1964 because African Americans were not treated equally in this country. And then additionally, I would say to those who are asking the question, the fact that cotton was king and built this nation, gave it its first economic arm, its first ability to have banks on Wall Street, that is a benefit to help build this country to move into the Industrial Revolution. All that money came from the labor of bonded slaves who were in bondage, who did not have any overhead, lost their lives, lived throughout their life as a slave, and never overcame that. That is clearly connected not only to the 20th century, but to the 21st century. And that's what a commission on reparations will be able to do. A thoughtful research, discussion, and overview and understanding that is presented to the American people with the right kind of proposals and reparations that would be readily understood and readily available and readily accepted.
Okay, my royal family, let me shut this.
Cologuard, colon cancer screening for people 50.
And I wanted to point out something. They never discussed Chuck Schumer. Schumer announced support for bill to form committee on reparations. Nothing more than a person who was designated to watch the gatekeepers. And the reason why more of these white people are coming on board, now we're just talking about the study of, because your voice is being heard and they are getting concerned. And we will see more of them. So don't think with all these distractions that they are using that ADOS, the spirit of ADOS is not being felt. And to me, it's just such a waste of time. Again and again and again. Cut the motherfucking check. All these studies, all these investigations have already been done. And these folks want to play like they don't have a clue what to do. Stall tactics. But just in case, don't lose sight. Just in case any of these black folks seem like they shifting their energy other than being the gatekeepers, you got these motherfuckers watching you closely. Because they got their little secret society and secret committees. Because they stay on code. So the question that I ask is, when will we ever get on code and have what they have? See, we have to worry about one of ours breaking their fucking neck, getting to the enemy and letting massa know what we doing behind the scenes so they can get one of them extra butter biscuits. So my royal family, render your voice with your beautiful divine words. And as always, my royal family, I thank you for your love. I thank you for your support. And with that said, Ashe.